an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Ruin and Rising, chapters 5 and 6. In these chapters, our crew finally manages to find a way above ground, and then they get captured, but then they get rescued. There's a lot of getting captured and then getting rescued in these books. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Joanna for commissioning this episode. Hi, Joanna, if you're out there. What's up? I feel like I've mentioned before, when I was little, I used to pretend that my name was Joanna. I don't know why, but I loved the name Joanna, and that was like my play name when I was like pretending to be a character in a book. Oh, she is here. Hi, Joanna. So these chapters, we move forward a lot in terms of like the overall positioning of our crew. Previously they had just been leaving the White Cathedral and were trapped underground. We ended the last chapter with them getting bombed. And I was pretty certain that it was going to turn out they weren't being specifically targeted. I even wondered if maybe it was going to turn out they weren't being bombed, if it was going to wind up being something else. But it does end up that they are simply they were going to be collateral damage in what looks to be a routine bombing, just carried out because this is what we do now, just to shore up our own routine. It's like they don't fully expect to find her or anybody by doing this, but they can't stop doing it because as soon as they do that, then people are going to feel those areas are safe. So it's sort of like insurance, and the bombs are accompanied, and they mention this in the beginning of the previous section, by a gas that is meant to be the second phase in their attempts to clear these tunnels out. So they'll do the bombing in order to drop stone on people's heads. And then they flood the place with gas and send down a spark so that the whole place gets filled with flame for a moment. And I'm certain that works quite well when it's done. But in this, in this instance, they have Grisha with them, squallers, who can send air pushing towards the gas and towards the flame and send them in two different directions. So it's actually a pretty good scene because I really liked seeing how calm Mal manages to be, despite the fact that, everybody is losing their head. Everybody is terrified. It really feels like they've been backed into a corner. And he still manages to approach this whole thing with a great deal of presence of mind and rationale that I found very admirable. And this is, one of my flaws, as anybody who has listened to a lot of the show knows. I tend to be a little bit too rational. I find it very comforting. What can I say? And I am often more of a Mal in certain situations, when when things get turned on their head unexpectedly and maybe grow dangerous or urgent, I tend to respond more this way, where I am very in the moment and know how to handle it. And then I sort of fall apart afterward. Tends to be my MO. And it's served me well, so I hesitate to let go of that, but it can take a toll in its way where you begin to feel resentful of the fact that it's always you that's stepping up when shit gets intense. But Mal seems to, I would guess if he were to be asked about this, the fact that he isn't a Grisha obviously wears on him a little bit. He's mentioned it before. So I am going to guess that Mal enjoys that he has this characteristic because it at least makes him deeply useful in moments where the rest of the Grisha aren't really very helpful. They have these abilities, but without him telling them what to do, I don't know that they would have gotten out of here. He's directing them, and they follow his orders, but they don't seem to think to do this on their own. So I thought that was kind of interesting to watch. And another thing that they are doing is using air pressure to hold the rock up off of them. And it's, not like they don't get covered with dust and all kinds of stuff, but there's like a major rock fall. And they are able to hold parts of the tunnel upward to keep people from getting crushed. They're able to help hold up the sides of a hole, because later on they find Sergei and Stig are like buried, and they're okay, but it's like it would be a close thing to get them out of there and not have the whole thing collapse in on itself as they're digging them out, which is like, I think in the past few years, or not even past few years, probably like about 7 or 8 years ago, it seemed like there were several spates of people getting stuck in mines, miners winding up buried but still alive, and we would try and rescue them in various ways. And sometimes it was just that they were trapped. Sometimes it was that they were trapped and there was water rising. And I don't know how many of y'all remember this, but it was just the kind of thing that for me, it was like the worst nightmare, where you sometimes would be able to talk to the person, but you would know that they weren't going to get out. So people would have their last words to a spouse or a brother over a microphone, knowing that not only am I not going to see them again, but there's a chance we're not even going to be able to get their body out because it's too dangerous. So it would have been really nice to have some squallers, is all I'm saying. And I love when they finally get them out. Here it is. They were covered in mud and nearly comatose. Lowered our pulses, Sergei mumbled groggily. Slower respiration, use less air. Didn't think you'd come, slurred a still bleary Stig. Why? Cried Genya, still brushing the dirt from around his eyes. He wasn't sure that you'd care, said Harshaw from behind me. There were mumbled protests and some guilty looks. I did think of Stig and Harshaw as outsiders. And Sergei, well, Sergei had been lost for a while now. None of us had done a very good job of reaching out to them. So this is one of those moments where I actually was like pleasantly surprised by this, because personally, I think I said flat out in the last episode, oh, okay, so we've got some red shirts along. Because that really is how it feels. When we've got characters that get added to the crew, and it's towards the end of a series, and they are added when we know we are about to be going up against a big bad, when we are going on an adventure, it really does just feel like, oh, okay, we need these people so that we can have folks to be killed along the way to increase the feeling of urgency without actually sacrificing any characters that we've really grown to love. And personally, I am not willing to take that back simply because she has lampshaded it here. But I will say that the fact that she has pointed it out makes me wonder if perhaps she's going to do something different than I thought. I am still of the opinion it's likely, but I'm interested. I'm willing to, wait and see what it is she actually chooses to do with them. And also, I just thought it was sort of funny because she says something about how nobody had done a very good job of reaching out to them. And I really expected this to be followed up with her attempting to reach out to them. No, it's not. She's like, oh yeah, nobody did a very good job of reaching out to them. Oh well. And then moves right along, and it doesn't really feel like anybody has made an effort at that. Now, not a lot of time is available for that kind of thing to happen. So maybe folks will begin to do it now that they're sort of settled into the headquarters with Nikolai. But I just expected it to be like something that was on her mind more, at least, and it wasn't. It just, she mentions it here, and then we proceed, and she doesn't seem to think about it again. Now, when she says Sergei had been gone for a while now, she's referring to the death of, was it his lover or his sister? I'm trying to remember. There was a woman that is killed, and he's like holding her body during the big attack. And I don't remember who she was to him. But I think that's what she's referring to when she says that, right? Is that basically, like, Sergei has not recovered from the trauma of that. And she doesn't know that he is ever going to. And there's a sense of, like, that he has retreated in himself to a degree that I don't know anybody is going to be able to reach him unless they have a similar story in their history, which actually might be somewhat likely considering that everybody's living in a war zone at this point. But the fact that she says, you know, that he had been gone for a while now, had been lost for a while now, I was like, I mean, it hasn't been that long since her death in the grand scheme of things, right? How long were they underground since the fight went down? Has it been like a couple months? I feel like it's been mentioned that it was like 3 months, but I may be pulling that out of nowhere. But yeah, if you went through something like that, I feel like using the term lost is a little harsh. Lost implies that's it, you know, and I don't, like, I know that there would be people who would disagree with me on that, who would say, no, you can be found, you know, lost doesn't mean permanent, but there is a sense to it of it being something that's like, unless something is done, he will remain unhappy or he will remain in this state. And sometimes people just need a lot of time to grieve and get over something, especially when I think this person that he lost was sort of his last connection to anybody who had meant anything to him. And so not only does she see him as an outsider, but he sees himself as an outsider, which is not a great place to be when you are mourning someone, because it feels like you're the only person who even cares that your friend or a loved one is gone, and nobody's really going to want to hear about it or talk about it with you or know anything about the person that you're sharing things about. And, you know, that's a very isolating experience. So I don't know. I'm just interested to see if anything more happens with them later on. If Sergei is somebody that can be turned because of, you know, I don't expect so, because the Darkling is the one responsible for the death of his person. But it does feel like there is something being built up about his situation and his mental state. And I just wonder what that's going to turn out to be. So they all get out of there, finally, and manage to get to a place where the ground is sloping upward. And they find a trapdoor, and it turns out that the trapdoor opens up into a crypt. They send Mal up ahead of them, and they are in the middle of like a cemetery. And I am just so curious, like, who built this? Why did they build it? What need is there for a tunnel system to reach a crypt? Like, who is, because it's not like, I'm not saying that this is unbelievable, you know, I don't have a problem with it story-wise. I'm just really curious because for me, this seems like the kind of thing where, I don't know, maybe somebody was like planning an escape route. It's the sort of thing that I would think of as like when people built priest holes and things like that into their homes when they were suffering religious persecution. And I'm like, could that be it? I mean, maybe. Or if there was just somebody who maybe liked to fuck around on his mistresses. And so he'd be like, send a horse to meet me at the crypt. And he would sneak out of his house, you know. But anyway, they get out of there. And when they are above ground, I really liked this, what it was that Alina's sort of point of view is on this, which is just, first of all, it is really nice to be above ground. Fresh air, trees, light. And when she comes out, it's the middle of the night. And even so, all of the starlight on her causes her to glow. It's this feeling of just soaking it in. And I really enjoyed this because the stars are suns. So if she is a sun summoner, but it's just stars that are available, that still counts. So it makes sense. The moonlight would also work, you know, it's just reflected sunlight. So in a practical sense, I like that. But also, so this past weekend, Owen and I went to the Dallas Arboretum. And I actually posted pictures of this on my Facebook. If you are friends with me, you can see them. But they were having this event called Dallas Blooms. And they do it every year, and every year I miss it. Because Owen and I will tend to go to the Arboretum on Valentine's Day, which is a little bit too early. And then we don't visit again until probably like May or June, and that's too late. But Dallas Blooms is when they have all of their daffodils and tulips blooming. And we went and we found like a sort of secluded area and sat with our folding chairs and read and just hung out. And it really, I had this feeling as I was sitting there. It was one of those days where the air is so clear, the temperature is so perfect, the breeze is just right, where you are just like, there is literally not a thing I could think of to make this better right now. This is perfection. And I was sitting there looking around at this beautiful garden, these surroundings, and my feet were bare, and I was just like drinking in this view of a lake in the distance that was sparkling. And I said to Owen, this feels like food. Like I'm sitting here absorbing this into my system like a nutrient. I feel like the beauty of it is nourishing me somehow. It was this feeling of just profound, like, oh, I needed this so much, like a drink of water, you know? So the way that she reacts when she comes out into the starlight, because I had just had a feeling that I would describe as similar, I was like, oh, I really get it. I feel you on this a little bit, you know. It's funny because we don't live in an urban area. But I would get this way sometimes with Philadelphia, where I really liked being near the city. I liked public transport and everything, but I really missed being able to hear tons of birds singing, being able to smell grass, being able to take a breath of air, and there's no scent of, you know, exhaust or anything like that. And now I have it even more exaggerated because I'm already in the suburbs. There's grass, there's birds and whatnot, but it isn't that kind of profound beauty, you know? It's just an ordinary neighborhood with, you know, kind of crappy houses. And going to this other place, I was just like, wow, this is really like, if walking around my neighborhood and enjoying the sun and just the semi-clean air is food, that would probably be like a chicken leg and some mashed potatoes. But going to the Arboretum is like getting a filet mignon with like a beurre blanc and, you know, something with truffles on the side. It's just that extra bit that makes you go, oh my God, this is just the epitome, you know? So she starts glowing and they have to kind of be like, hey, maybe tone that down a tiny bit because you might attract attention. I let their light fall over me like a balm, grateful for the air in my lungs, the night all around me. So they fall in behind him, behind Mal, as I did not say. And they have to send on, who is it that they send onward? I'm trying to find, I think it's Tamar. Yes. Tamar is the one that is going to have to move forward to meet whomever can meet them at the assigned point, rendezvous point in town. And nobody winds up meeting them. So they kind of think maybe Nikolai can't make it. Maybe and it's not like Nikolai himself was meant to be there, but maybe something has happened that has changed the situation. And as we find out later, they have been keeping an eye on the whole thing. So they had seen Tamar, but they don't go to meet her because they are aware that they are being looked for in return. Also, there's a thing going on between Tamar and Nadia, which I enjoy. I really enjoy seeing Tamar show off for Nadia. She says something about how she's got fresh trouble if anybody wants any, and shows her the handles of her axes. And later on when she comes back, she keeps playing around with her knife, like spinning it and flicking it and catching it. And as she's going off, Tolia yells something after her and she replies. And Alina asks what that means. And Tolia says, it's something our father taught us. Yuyasesh, despise your heart. The real meaning is more like, do what needs to be done, be cruel if you have to. The other part is Niwesesh, I have no heart. Mal raised an eyebrow. Your dad sounds like fun. Tolia smiled, the slightly mad grin that made him look just like his sister. He was. So everybody begins to make camp. And everybody is extremely jumpy. They're trying to enjoy the fact that they're out in the world above ground, but it's out of their control in a way that being underground was not. They felt safe down there, despite the fact that it really wasn't. And it just is much more exposed. I looked at our camp. Harsha was already curled up and snoozing with Oncat on his chest. Sergei, pale and watchful. David, back propped against a tree, a book in his hands as Genya fell asleep with her head in his lap. Nadia and Adric struggling with the poles and canvas while Zoya looked on and didn't bother to help. I enjoy Zoya. So Tamar comes back. Nobody was there to meet her. They suggest maybe sending Tolia the next day, even though Tolia is so huge that there's a danger he's going to attract attention. But having Tamar go back twice in a row will also attract attention, so they just sort of have to decide what they're willing to risk. And she brings back news, at the very least, that West Ravka has declared for Nikolai. They're blocking off the western shore of the fold, she continued, so if the Darkling wants weapons or ammunition, he'll have to go through Fjerda. This meant the Darkling had lost West Ravka's coastline, its navy, the already tenuous access Ravka had to trade. So this is really good news and makes everybody feel a little bit more hopeful, because that's something that's been a struggle over the past few months, it sounds like, is they are not in contact with anybody. They don't really know what's going on. And Alina, being the Sun Summoner, is all well and good, but she's not strategically in a position to do anything. So everybody's been sort of, feeling like they're stymied and that there hasn't been any forward movement, and there won't be unless they're able to do something. But it's nice to know that there's still forward movement, even without their direct involvement. Things are happening, So she goes to talk to Mal about all of this, and let's see. We could wait another day, I offered. We've wasted enough time. I don't know how long it will take us to get south to find the Firebird. All we need is to get stuck in the mountains when the snow comes, and we have to find a safe house for the others. Tamar says Westrovka has declared for Nikolai. What if we took them there? So this is just sort of irrelevant considering what winds up happening. But she spots him with his back to her and his shirt off because he's like been fishing, and sees that he has this huge tattoo across his back. Something like a compass rose, but much more like a sun, the points reaching from shoulder to shoulder and down his spine. Why? I asked. Why would you do this? He shrugged and his muscles flexed beneath the intricate design. And it says something in another language, and she asks what it means, and he doesn't want to tell her. He says it's embarrassing. And finally he says, I am become a blade. Now, this is one of those things that I have this, like, I don't know if the word is bias against. The whole sentence structure of I am become a blade. I am become death, destroyer of worlds. I am become. Why is that an acceptable sentence structure? That is such a weird thing. I don't understand. And it's obviously accepted as correct. It's something that is used a lot. But I feel the same way about when somebody is what they want to say is, oh, this really needs to be cleaned. But instead they say, this needs cleaned. This needs cleaned. What? But that's like said commonly. And I find it baffling. We just change, like, what I would think it would be is, I have become a blade. Why is it I am become a blade? Is it meant to be more like about the essence of who you are, and the word am does that more than the word have? I mean, I'm not sure that works for me. It's just distracting, is what I'm saying. I actually rather like this. He's embarrassed by it, and I can understand that. It's sort of like the meme of, you know, while you guys were watching Lil Nas X video, I studied the blade kind of thing. So I can understand being a bit embarrassed by it. I do get it. But at the same time, it is kind of dope. I'm not mad about it. I just don't really understand the fact that that sentence structure is something that we all accept. And it's just not this book. It's, you know, just a thing that's been done. And I find it odd. So I just wanted to mention it. Ms. T says it feels like an affection. I think she meant affectation. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. It's like, it's just kind of pretentious feeling. And part of me feels, on the one hand, like I want to roll my eyes. But on the other, I am become a blade does feel like it has more impact to it due to the fact that we know when it's structured that way that it's meant to be more profound. So, but a part of me is like, yeah, but that's because we've assigned it that, not necessarily because the words make it feel that way. I don't know. I just had to mention it because it's something that's always bothered me, like the way that we phrase things here and there. So at this point, she's starting to like drag her fingers over his back as she looks at the tattoo, and he has a reaction which she notices, and he keeps doing it, and he stops her and says, I can't do this. Not if you make me laugh. Not if you touch me like that. And then they get caught by somebody. Now, really, I said at the beginning of this that there's a lot of getting captured and then rescued in these books, and that is absolutely true. And it's not even a problem for me necessarily. It's just that they always get captured when they are alone together. You know, it's just always has to be Alina and Mal having a moment off by themselves, and then suddenly the Darkling is here, you know, something. And I just find it to be a little bit too predictable now, that whenever they are getting a little bit vulnerable with one another, they wind up being interrupted by some sort of crisis. And it's just because of the fact that these 3 books rely so much on the like love triangle thing, love quadrangle, really. It makes it feel a lot more annoying because it's like the author is actively trying to keep them from having certain conversations and actively trying to keep us like wanting more, because she'll start them down the road of talking about a thing and then have it be interrupted in this really calculated way. And it's the kind of thing that would be frustrating if I actually was rooting for the 2 of them to get together. It would be frustrating enough, and that would just bother me. But because I don't actually care if they get together or not, it's somehow like even more annoying because I can see the seams of what she's trying to do and I don't give a shit about it. So I just have to mention that because you guys all know that this whole romance thing is not working for me, and it hasn't. In my opinion, it's by far the worst part of this trilogy. It's just she relies on it too much. The characters don't have like Mal and Nikolai in a lot of ways feel to me like better drawn characters than Alina even does, which is a shame. And that's part of what the danger is of making a central protagonist be sort of trying to make them be rational and relatable, is that to a point it can feel like they just are a sort of self-insert of the author, or the author is trying to make them too relatable to everyone. And that is sort of where I'm at with Alina, is like the Darkling at least is, while he sucks and, you know, is a murderous lunatic asshole, at least I get that about him. And Mal's like, honestly, to me, the best potential mate if I was going to pick one for Alina, because he has the least personality, because then there's Nikolai. And Nikolai is, let's be honest, too good for Alina. I'm sorry, but I had to say it. Nikolai is too smart, too funny, too clever. I don't feel like Alina can keep up with Nikolai. I'm just saying. So I don't know. It's the sort of thing that when you try and make people a little bit more ordinary, you fall into the danger of making them a little too boring. And I feel like that sort of happened. The one thing with Mal about his personality is that he is a take charge guy. He's a good tracker. And he is obviously in love with Alina. Other than that, I just don't really feel like I know him. And so the fact that they get interrupted here, it wasn't even like, oh shit. It was like, oh, again, really? And it turns out that Mal actually knows the guy, but it doesn't wind up mattering, because there was a bit of a moment where it was like, oh, maybe they'll be able to get out of this. Maybe it'll turn out that Mal and this guy are friends or see eye to eye on something and they can come to a deal. But no, it's just really kind of like, oh yeah, it's you, Mal. How about that? And then they realize that they've got the Sun Summoner, and they're like, oh sweet, we can definitely sell you to the Darkling, and it'll be, you know, basically our retirement money. I'm really curious if that is true. I don't have the faith that they do, that the Darkling would pay. I think he would. I feel like in some ways the Darkling is trying to keep up a pretense of the fact that he is going to rule in a way that, is reasonable or like at least similar enough to kings they've seen before to feel familiar. So maybe he would pay them just to keep up this like appearance. But I wouldn't trust him enough to be willing to make this, like, he just feels like he might do that to keep up appearances for other people, but his instinct would be to kill you and take her and not pay you jack shit. That said, he isn't in a position where it would hurt him to pay them. It would only do good for his like reputation to pay them, more than likely, to make it look like, yeah, if you cooperate with me, I'll cooperate with you. It's to your benefit. So maybe he would. I don't know. So they're getting captured, and Alina, it says, again, I locked gazes with Mal. He wanted me to act. I could feel it. As long as my hands weren't bound together, I could summon and control the light. But what about the other Grisha? I don't remember if this has been mentioned before, about her hands being bound and like controlling the light due to that. I find that to be sort of an odd handicap, I guess. Like that just tying her hands together means that she can't summon or can't control it. I could see it being more difficult, but it's sort of written like that's completely out of the question. And that's, I feel like maybe this has been brought up before in terms of like other Grisha as well and their abilities. And I know that this is sort of a common thing, like in the magicians as well. All of your magic comes from your hands. There's a character who loses some fingers and is unable to cast due to the fingers get put back on, but it's like not the same. But I do find that to be such a bummer because it feels like weirdly ableist. Like there are people out there born without hands or who lose hands in accidents. And does that mean that they just can't perform magic anymore? There's nothing to be done? Like that sucks. So I guess that is the idea, that if you're Grisha and you're born without hands, maybe you never know that you're Grisha. Or if you're Grisha and you lose a hand, now you can't do anything. So, but we know that they lose their health because they can't use their power. If they are kept from using it, they begin to grow weaker. And so that's like a double punishment. If you were a Grisha and you lost a hand, not only would you not be able to use your Grisha abilities anymore, but you would also begin to grow even weaker because you couldn't use them. That sucks. Anyway, so they go back to, I love this moment. It's so funny. So let's see. The guy who is in charge, Luchenko, of this little like band of mercenaries, he goes to make a speech to his people, and there's like a fair-sized crowd here, and they also have some of the like crew, Alina's crew. Why not ransom her to Nikolai Lantsov, said a soldier from somewhere near the back of the circle. Now that I was in the middle of the clearing, there seemed to be even more of them. Lantsov, Luchenko said. If he had a brain in his head, he'd be, he's rusticating somewhere warm with a pretty girl on his knee, if he's even alive. He's alive, said someone. Luchenko spat. Makes no matter to me. And your country? I asked. What has my country ever done for me, little girl? No land, no life, just a uniform and a gun. Doesn't matter if it's the Darkling on the throne or some useless Lantsov. I saw the prince when I was in Osalta, said Ekaterina. He's not bad looking. Not bad looking, said another voice. He's damnably handsome. Luchenko scowled. Since when? Brave in battle, smart as a whip. Now the voice seemed to be coming from above us. Luchenko craned his neck, peering into the trees. An excellent dancer, said the voice. Oh, and an even better shot. Who, Luchenko never got to finish. A blast rang out, and a tiny black hole appeared between his eyes. And that is how Nikolai makes his entrance again. Nikolai, you are a man after my own heart. This delighted me so much. I really enjoy Nikolai. He is probably my favorite character in these books. And this like reintroduction after everything that's happened of first going and, you know, giving himself a bunch of compliments before he takes this guy out and the guy doesn't even know it's coming is so funny to me. And there had been a thing that I think Genya did, or maybe it was Zoya. I think it was Zoya, where when they had the cave in and they were trying to find Stig and not Siegfried. Well, you guys know who I mean. When she was trying to find the two of them, she used her like squalor abilities to sort of bounce sound around to try and find them, and because like calling out and in this cave at random, just yelling their names out, the two guys from where they were couldn't hear. But what she was attempting to do was bounce the sound around in a variety of ways so that depending on where they were, they would actually be able to hear her, and that wound up working. And it also, she was able to bounce sound back to her from wherever they were so that they could be located. And I'm assuming that that was what was done there, was that Zoya was bouncing the prince's voice around so that it kept sounding like he was coming from different areas or that there were multiple people and it was really him the whole time. So they wound up getting rescued. They sprint out and they're coming towards this like patch of sort of swamp. And it's a weird moment where she's looking at this like area that is covered in mist, even though the sun is out and it's like hot. And it just doesn't seem like this should be happening, that there should be some steam coming up. Shrouded in mist, that's the one. We pelted over the marshy soil and they skid to a halt and Nikolai says, hold on tight. And they say, to what? And then we were rising. Cables snapped into place beside us as the field itself seemed to lift. I looked up. The mist was parting and a massive craft hovered directly over our heads, its cargo hold open. It was some kind of shallow barge equipped with sails at one end and suspended beneath a huge oblong bladder. And so, yeah, they have been... They put this down, kept it shrouded in mist with squallors, I'm sure, so that it wasn't, you know, evident that it was attached to a craft of any kind. And then they have this, like, platform that is in this, like, it's made of mesh so that the dirt and leaves and grass can, like, poke up from underneath it and almost conceal it, you know, which I think is a really neat idea. As they're going up, Nikolai says to Mal, they know we have the Sun Saint. And Mal grabs a pistol and gets Tolia and Tamar, and they all three of them jump down to take care of the dudes who are on the ground. And I thought that, like, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed like the whole militia knew that they had the Sun Summoner. And I don't feel like these three are going to be able to finish all of them. Is that because it says cutting through the remaining ranks of militia while Nikolai and his crew tried to lend cover from above? That's a lot of people that all, like, just these three are meant to be handling. That just feels a little bit much to me. I guess I don't have a good idea of how big the militia was. But using the word militia for me sounds like it's going to be 100 people. And maybe I'm just overestimating that. But at one point, Mal is being jumped from behind by this dude who comes out of nowhere. I think it looked like the dude was dead. And Mal turns his back, taking it for granted that that guy is dead, and he starts to get up. And Alina uses the cut on him and kills him. And as soon as she does, she has to turn and throw up. And meanwhile, she looks over and she sees Stig lighting the body on fire and realizes, like, oh yeah, we're killing them all in order to keep there from being any witnesses remaining that know I was here. But a body being sliced in half in that particular way is a dead-ass giveaway that I was here. So that really wouldn't have been helpful if Stig hadn't thought to do that. Which I actually did appreciate. I don't think that would have occurred to me. I'm not totally sure what it is about using the cut that makes it look different from being sliced by a sword, perhaps. Maybe the assumption is just no sword could slice somebody completely in half like that. I don't know if that's even true. I don't know enough about sword fighting. I would assume that you could cut somebody in half, but I also have watched too many movies. So what do I know? And they get up into the air, and Nikolai asks her where the rest of her people are, and she has to be like, this is everybody. I'm sorry. This is all of them. And he makes an apology to her, like, I did come back. And she's surprised, realizing that he has been feeling guilty this whole time. And she's like, dude, I never thought that you didn't come back. You definitely needed to run, because otherwise you would have died. And I mean, even now, you very well may die. So please don't feel guilty, because I never felt like you had abandoned us. There was nothing that you could have done. And I appreciated that a lot, because if I were him, I would certainly feel the same way. Just like, oh my God, do they hate me because I did this? And, I made the decision I needed to at the time, but it doesn't really make me look great. So, let's see. Did you get Bagra out? At great trouble and with little thanks. You might have warned her about me. She's a treat, isn't she? Like a fine plague. And we wind up seeing Bagra a little bit later, and it is pretty fun. So, this is when she tells him about maybe being able to build her own army out of beings of light. And that this is what she's thinking she could use the last amplifier for. And she thinks that he's going to tell her, like, warn her against doing it. And he doesn't. He's just sort of like, all right, well, I mean, we'll figure it out. And she's like, I really thought that you were going to be a lot more against this or warn me. Saints, Alina, I hope you weren't looking to me to be the voice of reason. I can't read today. I keep to a strict diet of ill-advised enthusiasm and heartfelt regret. But I'm truly sorry for the soldiers you lost, and that I didn't do more that night. So they continue on, and they are really high up. They manage to get up above the cloud cover at one point. And they are heading towards this mountain, and she's sort of looking at it because she can see this bonkers staircase going up the front of the mountain. And she's like, what is that? Why would anybody? And we wind up finding out later that that is in place from hundreds of years ago as a path for pilgrims to go on this sort of, pilgrimage, as pilgrims do. But that the spot that he has taken over had been there already. It's not like this place was totally created by him from scratch. So they enter this stone hangar. We crowded at the railing, gaping at the hectic bustle around us. 3 other crafts were docked in the hangar. A second cargo barge like the Pelican, the sleek Kingfisher, and a similar vessel that bore the name Bittern. It's a kind of heron, said Mal, pulling on a pair of borrowed boots. They're smaller, sneaky. I love this so much. I actually copy-pasted this into the group because I found this so funny. The rest of us waited for the gangway to be lowered, then shuffled off the barge. Impressive, Mal said. I shook my head in wonder. How does he do it? Want to know my secret? Nikolai asked from behind us. We both jumped. He leaned in, looked from left to right, and whispered loudly, I have a lot of money. I rolled my eyes. No, really, he protested. A lot of money. God, I found that shit so funny, you guys. I really did. Like, this is one of those things that I know that we all know it, but I really feel like it does bear repeating whenever we see a character who can do these incredible things in a book or a TV show. So much of the time they also somehow have access to money that nobody else. So they're given a lot of credit for things, but also they happen to be incredibly privileged and they are in a position where they're able to do this. Whereas being a genius, but with no money, I mean, what good is that? You can't actually try or build anything. So I just really, it's sort of the same thing as like those absurd articles that will come out every now and then with somebody like how she paid off all of her student loan debt and bought a house before the age of 25. And buried somewhere within the article is the fact that her mother gave her a condo to stay in rent-free for 4 years. Like, just bullshit like that they'll just drop it in like that really isn't that big a deal. I'm sure everybody can work out something like that, you know? So they get off and they are put onto like an elevator that goes, it sounds like it either goes too fast or they're all just so unfamiliar with the sensation of being on an elevator that they all are like, yeah, I'm never getting on that again. And they step out onto the top of, as she calls it, a hollowed out mountain. The frost fingers, the frost fingers were actually enormous bronze columns cast in the shapes of people and creatures. They towered above us, bracketing huge panels of glass that looked out onto the ocean of cloud below. The glass was so clear that it gave the space an eerie sense of openness, as if a wind might blow through and send me tumbling into the nothingness beyond. My heart started to hammer. Deep breaths, Nikolai said. It can be overwhelming at first. This is something that I would really enjoy getting to see on a big screen. You know, a lot of these books are very cinematic, and this is something that sort of, it actually doesn't have anything to do with Grisha Power, and it's just like a really neat idea as a setting. And I really wonder if this is the kind of thing that could be pulled off, because the danger these days with something like this is that it's all done completely digitally, which makes it feel very inert when you're watching it. It's sort of the same thing that happened with, like, if you ever watched Jupiter Ascending, there goes a movie that is very beautiful, but in this cold, impersonal, unreal sort of way, like a video game is. And I really wonder if there would be a way to pull this off without having to go completely digitally, or doing it digitally, but managing to keep that feeling from happening, where it just seems like the setting doesn't affect the people in the scene at all. Because I think maybe that's what it is that makes it feel inert, is when the actors seem so, because they're in reality standing in a white room and green screens all over the place, right? So to a point, it's like, well, yeah, it's not real, so of course they're not reacting to it. But like, that's supposed to be their job. And I'm certain it's really difficult to do that kind of awe when you can't actually see it, when maybe it's hard for you to picture the kind of awe, the room itself, you know? But anyway, so this is when she asks to be brought to Bagra. And I really enjoyed this. It turns out that Bagra rather likes Nikolai, and she doesn't want to admit it, but she definitely does. And she still has her servant boy, who is Misha, and he's only 7. And Alina feels really bad, first of all, that she didn't think to ask if Misha was okay. But then she realizes that he's here as a child, like all alone, and asks him how he likes it. And he admits, like, it's hard because there's nobody to play with. And she decides that she's going to arrange for him to learn how to fight as something to do, something to occupy him. And Bagra is kind of interested. Let's see, I'm trying to find the spot. Did you mean what you said to Misha? Are you thinking of bringing the students here? The children from the Grisha school at Osalta had been evacuated to Karemzin, along with their teachers and Botkin, my old combat instructor. Their safety had been nagging at me for months, and now I was in a position to do something about it. If Nikolai agrees to house them at the spinning wheel, would you consider teaching them? She said with a scowl. Someone has to. Who knows what garbage they've been learning with that bunch? And she asks, so that seems like it's established, but they get interrupted by Bagra hitting Alina with a stick and telling her to show Bagra her wrists. And she tries to just be like, I don't have the amplifier. And Bagra's like, show me. She wants proof. And finally, Alina admits that I used Merzost. I didn't do it myself. I used the connection between us. I created Nikshevoya. Bagra's hands scrambled for mine. She seized my wrists in a painful grip. You must not do this, girl. You must not trifle with this kind of power. This is what created the fold. Only misery can come of it. I may not have a choice, Bagra. We know the location of the Firebird, or at least we think we do. Once we find it, you'll sacrifice another ancient life for the sake of your own power. Maybe not, I protested weakly. I showed the stag mercy. Maybe the Firebird doesn't have to die. Listen to you. This is not some children's story. The stag had to die for you to claim its power. The Firebird is no different, and this time the blood will be on your hands. And then she says, though that doesn't bother you as much as it should, does it, girl? No, I admitted. Have you no care for what there is to lose? For the damage you may cause? I do, I said miserably. I do, but I'm out of options, and even if I weren't, you would seek it just the same. I won't deny it. I want the Firebird. I want the Amplifier's combined power. But it doesn't change the fact that no human army can stand against the Darkling shadow soldiers. And Bagra replies with abomination against abomination. And really, Alina's kind of like, maybe. Like, if that's what needs to happen, then yeah, okay. And they talk a little bit longer about Morozova and the journals, and she mentions having read them. And Bagra laughs a little bit and talks about how the Darkling obsessed over them, thinking that there had to be something like secret or coded or even in invisible ink. And eventually just giving up on it and feeling like he wasted his time and cursing Morozova. And Alina asks whether or not there's a chance that Morozova left the cycle unfinished and never actually created the third amplifier. And Bagra says Morozova never could have left that undone. It wasn't his way. And there's this moment where Alina seems to be thinking, like, I'll read this. Something in her words lifted the hairs on my arms. A memory came to me. Bagra putting her hands to the collar on my neck at the little palace. I would have liked to see his stag. And I think that it's meant to insinuate that Bagra knew Morozova personally. And I guess we will find out. But they get interrupted by Mal, who says there's a problem with Genya and the king. Which I'm assuming because, like, when they arrived there, Alina was sort of reassured by the fact that Nikolai didn't know who Genya was because of the fact that she had been mutilated he didn't recognize her. And so she was sort of hoping that if they kept calling her by a different name, he wouldn't put together the fact that this is the woman who, like, you know, betrayed us a little while back. But evidently, something has happened and he has figured out who she is. And I am deeply curious what his reaction is going to be and what he is going to want to do. Because we know that, I think we know, I might be lying, but I'm pretty sure we know that Genya winds up okay. So, yeah, I really am looking forward to seeing what goes down with the two of them. So yeah, that is the end of these chapters. So next time I'm probably just going to do 8 and 9 again. I'm, you know, like I said, sort of going off of how long the audiobooks chapters are. Each of these was 45 minutes, which is longer than I normally do, but I think it worked out fine. So, yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. And there's how many chapters in this? 18. And we have how many more episodes? 1, 2, 3 are booked. So let's see, if I'm at 6, that means we have 12 left divided by 2 is 6 episodes total for the remainder of the book, unless some of them are shorter chapters, in which case this math doesn't work out. But, yeah, just wanted to put it out there. So I am actually enjoying things at this point in a way that I wasn't sure I would, because I did start to get so frustrated with the love triangle stuff. But it feels like that's beginning to fall to the wayside, at least a little bit, just out of necessity to the plot. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing what happens next. So when is the next section? April 2nd, this Friday. Cool. So I get to read up again pretty shortly. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap. Thank you again so much to Joanna for commissioning this and to all of you for listening. And I will see you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.